Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Education Showroom podcast. And we have a real cracker for you today. And I'm delighted to introduce Lavinia. And Lavinia will be saying hi and tell you all about herself, her background, sharing experiences of the challenges in today's particular theme that schools, multi-academy trusts, staff, students are experiencing, and how Lavinia is expertingly supporting them and helping them. And then we'll have a talk about the M word, which is Lavinia's company, and anything and everything in between. So the title of today's podcast, and I'm sure you will agree, A, it's fascinating, but B, very much welcomed, and it's a key and ever concerning area. The title of today's podcast, ladies and gentlemen, is it negative behavior or communicating anxiety? Is it negative behavior or communicating anxiety? I'm delighted to welcome Lavinia as this week's special guest. Lavinia, good afternoon. It's lovely to see you. How's your week been so far?
Good afternoon, Matt. Thank you for asking. It's been okay, actually. Thank you. It's been a busy start already, hasn't it, for the term?
It certainly has. It's been a busy start to the whole academic year. It feels like it's click of a finger and all of a sudden it's gone. But no, it's lovely to have you here, and we're delighted and privileged to have you join us today with your background, your experience, and I know the incredible support, guidance, and strategies that you develop and deploy to support schools and that. But just for the listeners today, whether they're on Spotify or YouTube, I'd love to just learn a little bit about yourself, your background, your organisation, your history, your expertise. I think it'd be a lovely place to start today, Lavinia, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. So my name's Lavinia Dowling, and I am a mental health nurse. 2026 October is going to be very big because it will be my 30th work anniversary. I haven't stopped my license. I've been licensed to practice as a mental health nurse, and rather unusually, most mental health nurses fall into working with children or adults or older adults. I've worked consistently with every age group. And again, many mental health nurses tend to fall into one area within that category they've chosen, whereas I've worked unusually in every single field of mental health. I didn't enjoy forensics, so I did it once and never again. But I absolutely fell in love with working with people around poor self-esteem, poor mental health, around anxiety and feeling low in mood. Anxiety is definitely my biggest piece of working with any individual. So of course, I'm delighted to be here today to kind of help others think about what they might want to think about in and around anxiety.
Yeah, thank you. It's really interesting, isn't it? And incredible expertise and experience in a variety of fields. I mean, just a little bit of context is mental health and well-being in regards to what we hear at the Education Showroom, what we see, what we are shared, with the relationships we have with schools and MAT leaders. It's never been more important. It's stressed more and more. It's more and more concerning for so many different reasons, whether it's, incredible workload levels, dealing with incredibly challenging situations, whether it's with the students, the parents, governors, Department for Education, Ofsted, colleagues, just general daily stresses and everything in between. But also, of course, stresses in regards to, and it hurts me to say this, but of course, really talented educators leaving the profession, leaving the sector, and I'm sure that we're going to come on to that in throughout the podcast shortly. But yeah, that's why we're really keen to learn from you today, and it's great that we've got this podcast. So I think that dovetails really nicely, doesn't it, into one of the first things that we're looking to talk to you about today in this podcast, which is the challenges that schools and multi-academy trusts have historically had, are projected to have in regards to these stresses, mental health related. So let's start to unpick that, Lavinia, please. So over to you. What challenges do you hear, see, observe, are told, support with? What are those challenges that schools and maths are facing?
Well, I've already told you that I've been practicing for nearly 30 years. So that kind of gives you a clue of I'm quite old. Although many people might argue that's not old. So, but I remember very much in my day going to school where we didn't have access to the internet or mobile phones. So I think one of the biggest things that's really challenging a lot of educational professionals today is the fact that there is so much technology around. And because of the technology, things are happening fast and furious. So, a really classic example is we don't wait for snail mail, we wait for emails, and we get very irritable if an email is not responded to almost immediately, even though we try to introduce flexi hours and putting on the bottom of our screens, we might not be able to respond for 3 or 4 days. So I think technology has made huge advancement, but has brought with it incredible pressures and stresses. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is because of the technology, we are better informed. However, that brings more training needed, more understanding, more research, and just more of everything, which then puts a demand on everything else. And then, of course, we're trying to move with very many directives that have changed from government to government. And you're really just bouncing every single time of what change now? Are we going forwards? Are we going backwards? Are we reinventing the wheel? What's going on here? And when you think about how we have tried so hard to put the pupil's voice alongside the professional's voice, somebody's got to have the upper hand and call it a day. And then the last thing that I think that really has really changed the arena, as it were, for educational professionals is that we no longer have physical discipline to keep people behaving appropriately. And how do you argue with a young person when they're just arguing back? Because one, they've been encouraged to argue back because they have a voice and they have an opinion that should be acknowledged. But also, you can't do very much about it to instill people conforming. So you've got all these added pressures. And of course, education, like health, has progressed hugely with volumes of research and information. And so everybody in any form of education is under extreme pressure. And that's whether you're a pupil or a professional. So.
Yeah. And I think that word discipline as well, again, just sharing a personal example, is it just becomes second nature. You mentioned about the emails. It becomes second nature, doesn't it, to be checking your mobile phone all the time.
All the time.
Even when you're with family, having dinner, coffees, on the move, tube, bus, taxi, car, driving, holidays. It's literally relentless, isn't it? It is literally relentless. And you just don't really think about it. It's just something that you do. And the second thing, I think, just digesting and processing what you've said is, when I was at school.
Yeah, and you're younger than me.
Only a little bit. Mental health, of course it existed, but I can't tell you in any, for one single second of any of my educational experiences personally was it ever raised. Yeah. And I'm sure that, I left high school, I think in around 1994, I think, off the top of my head. Of course, mental health challenges existed, but they weren't spoken of. There was no education around it. There was very little support, if any. So it's like you said, the times incredibly different.
Incredibly different. It's just a totally different landscape, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, like many things, not just within education, but in life, in society, in business, is it becomes a point where everything becomes too much. It's almost like a pressure cooker, and at the end, there is some kind of outcome, whether it's a burst, an explosion, but it's too much. Whether it's and where I'm going with it is that's why I made the comment earlier about, unfortunately, it's too much for many. They leave the profession, they'll move to a different school, and all of that talent is so hard to then find and reintegrate into the school. And lots of such talented teachers and senior leaders in both maths and schools is such a difficult thing. Now let's have a chat about what schools and multi-academy trusts perhaps are trying to do themselves. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to apply? What are they trying to learn from different schools and maths and possibly industry? What are you seeing, hearing that schools and maths are trying to do for themselves, Lavinia, in regards to this area?
So periodically we do exhibitions, and some are very small, but therefore, say for example, the unions for head teachers and deputy head teachers and Senkos. And then of course you'll have your big meetups wherever you are in the country with heads of schools. And what is really interesting is over the last 5 years, now I think this is quite important, in that it's only really over the last 5 years we've started really addressing within these environments these opportunities to talk about mental health. And it was only in late 2024, I have to get my years right because we're now just nearly into 26, that I was attending as an exhibitor, and we had 3 speakers, one after the other. They were only talking for 15 minutes, and they spent 2 minutes, I timed it, 2 minutes on mental health. And we were the only exhibitor there talking about mental health, and nobody really wanted to come and speak to us. We were rather being avoided. So the challenge is really on these academic trusts to showcase that they understand the needs and that they are addressing the needs. But boy, oh boy, that stigma around anxiety and depression, no, we really don't want to talk about that. And I think part of the issue is that they don't have the physical capacity, never mind the mental capacity, the physical capacity to employ another piece of work for all their teachers to consider. It's just not physically possible. And so then you find that they're trying to build in counsellors, they're trying to build in specialists who can support, say, for example, autism or ADHD. They're trying really hard to get a CAMS person on board, even if it's just once a month, to come in and say, can you just hear these cases? Not see these people, can you just hear these cases? Because time is so incredibly finite as a resource. It's really challenging. And with others, with schools as well, you're thinking about other situations where you're looking at the staff's mental health, but you're looking at, why are there so many staff going off sick? What can I do? And they're then having to think about temporary staff coming in, which of course is increasing their bills, which they can't really afford. So there is this huge amount of pressure, but mental health still is the poor Cinderella. And I don't know if that's going to change in my lifetime, but it needs to.
Very interesting indeed. And I know, again, sharing professional experiences with organisations that we have worked with and organisations that we do work with, but again, from experience of working with schools and multi-academy trusts, is just something I learned there, where I picked up from a comment that you made, is if a school or MAT has had, or they have an online CPD platform, for example, not naming any names, the content that is specifically for mental health and well-being is microscopic percentages compared to what other topics of CPD is. And just going back to a point that you made about you're at a physical event, people were avoiding, it felt strange. It was strange. Just going back to that example as well, is we hear regularly from schools and that. So we currently use this, but we need something dedicated to mental health. We are thinking about it. We're at an early stage. We're thinking about this. We're learning, we're understanding we need to do more, learn more, invest more, whether it's time, effort, skill, money, expertise. So I think that's really interesting. We hear the same thing as what you kindly shared as well, which is there is stuff, but in terms of how important is it perceived, and how much great content is there compared to other things, microscopic. That's really, really
microscopic. Yeah.
Really interesting. Let's talk about the M word. We're all a huge fan of what you do. We're all a huge fan of the impact that your services bring to schools and maths. Again, for the listeners today, would you mind just articulating high level the typical types of help and support that you offer to schools and multi-academy trusts? I think it'd be lovely to kind of hear what you do as a whole and then how you do it.
Okay, well, let me start you with the birth story of the M word. So the M word actually opened its doors on the 28th of July in 2020, the height of the second lockdown, when everybody thought I'd lost my marbles. But in 2019, I had worked in a CAMS community team, and I very quickly ended up being their specialist because I work with autism and ADHD. And a parent came to me, and it had been something like the third or fourth referral. And the parent said to me, let me get this straight. My child has anxiety, so you would consider us. And I said, yes. My child has autism. Yes, but you won't consider us. We are now being discharged. And when we have CAMS dealing on a day-to-day basis, I mean, in any team, they're probably going to be getting something like 20 referrals a day. A large percentage of those are not going to be necessarily the parent or the GP. Actually, it's the schools. And the schools quite rightly turn around and say, listen, we're not mental health nurses, but this child is struggling with anxiety. This child is struggling to come in. And by that time, I'd been a specialist manager in bringing in new services. I brought in a safe haven for Woking. I had also been a specialist of bringing services together for South London and Maudsley. And I realised that whilst I've been doing my master's, that there was an awful lot of things that just won't change in a decade, and perhaps not even 25 years. And I thought, there's nobody around me, but there is a real gap. There's a hole, there's a gaping hole. And everybody's mental health is deteriorating fast. I'm fed up of this. It's not going to change unless somebody goes and does it. So that's why I went home and then applied to Companies House, and it got launched on New Year's Eve in 2019. But it took a few more months of kind of figuring out, what do I need to be able to offer? And it has been absolutely amazing, really amazing, because it's not the NHS who are interested in me. No, it's the local authorities, it's the schools, because every single child is entitled to have an education, but they won't learn if they have loads of anxiety, they can't get into school because of the anxiety, or worse, it's got to a point so bad that they're experiencing low mood, or they're self-harming or they're on a flight to suicidal harm. Yeah. That's not right, and it's not fair. And yes, a lot of people can put blame on parents, a lot of people can put equal blame on schools, but goodness me, they're not mental health nurses. Can you please give them a fighting chance of being able to say, I really don't know what to do? But it brings a bigger problem, because if you take, for example, why is the child absent from school? Can you record it as anxiety? Nope. Okay, so it's not authorized. Well, now we've got a problem. It's a problem that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Actually, we need to be kind of thinking about, can you get somebody like me on board? Can you figure out what's going on, Lavinia? Can you help us, give us some clues, help us understand what we might need to think about? But in so doing, maybe, just maybe, that the powers that be could then bring it back up the chain to government level, saying, you need to authorize mental health. Why can't you?
Yeah, incredibly powerful message there. And again, some fantastic personal experiences. Just to tie it back in, Lavinia, your phone rings, an email comes in, and let's say it's from a school and or multi-academy trust. Let's just paint kind of a daily picture for our listeners today. A daily picture meaning the most common types of requests for your services and help that you receive. Your phone rings, an email comes in. What kind of things are the schools and MATs asking you for help and support with, please?
So you've got silly behaviour, you've got clients throwing furniture, slamming doors, taking themselves on a bit of an AWOL around the school, can't find them, bit of a flight risk there. But also really, really struggling with poor grades and not feeling able to come in, or you've got a parent who's just not letting up. They are constantly on the phone going, my child is misbehaving at home. And you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, their behavior has been sublime at school. You know, it's not us, it's clearly something at home. And actually, it then lends itself to, well, it's a you problem, not an us problem. But actually, it's a bigger problem for all around, because everybody's anxiety is going to go through the roof eventually, be it the parent, be it the teacher, the Senko, or the child.
Interesting. A variety of things, but as you said, all actually, I used that word earlier, didn't I? Combust or explode. It all kind of comes together as one, and there is no winner at the end of the day. There is no winner. The stress and the anxiety from the students transmits to the teachers, the leaders, which transmits to parents, guardians, carers. The whole, the circle. There's no winner. And it's certainly an area and a topic that needs absolutely more eyes on, more urgency to improve and correct. We need, hopefully, the government to do something, as you said, be heard, be seen, and for them to do more.
I know when I've been attending the TES shows, and I have, the first time I ever did a TES show, I was absolutely quaking in my boots. And I'd been looking at other speakers and seeing rooms not filled very much. So I was kind of a bit blown away, but even more shaky when the first one I did was standing room only, which kind of told me people really want to hear about mental health. We just struggle to talk about it because it's quite intimidating, it's quite stigmatizing, but it's a growing problem. And if you think about what Professor Layard was desperately trying to do in 2006, he was trying to reduce the financial burden on the state, with so many people having to be on antidepressants or anxiolytics and having to take time off work. We're still struggling, aren't we? It's not going away. The problem is actually getting worse, isn't it?
Yeah. Very much so, very much so. Lavinia, thank you very much indeed. Listeners, as mentioned earlier, whether you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, I would love for you to get in touch with Lavinia, continue these incredibly powerful conversations, maybe pick up on a point that Lavinia's kindly made or shared, continue to discuss and debate certain parts. But school and MAT leaders, if this resonates with you, if you have any staff that require help, any students, as Lavinia has articulated, those specific types of triggers, those behaviours, those difficult moments. You've met Lavinia today. Lavinia, I'm sure, would love to hear from you and learn how she can be considered to help your learners, your staff, and your school as a whole. So hopefully you found this podcast, like I have, extremely impactful and very, very enjoyable. Lavinia, would you mind for the listeners just sharing your contact details, please, should they choose to get in touch and pick up where you and I are about to finish today?
Sure. Okay, so our website is www.the-m for mental-word cic.co.uk. You can email us on info@the-m-word, and that's obviously info@the-m-word cic.co.uk. Or you can telephone us on 0792 82 32037. So, and we'd obviously be delighted to speak to you, Ellie or myself. So Ellie is our SEN education consultant, and I'm obviously the mental health nurse.
Super. Lavinia, thank you very much for being this week's special guest. It's been an
thank
honor
you so
and a privilege
much
to talk with you today, and have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Bye now.